Ready to be wowed by some simple but amazing painting techniques? Hi everyone, and welcome to my studio, Create with Chris. I'm Chris Haughey, and today we're painting Hello Winter, which is the newest addition to my Interchangeable Plaque Series. When I was painting this, I stumbled upon a few new techniques, and I'm so excited to share how easy and impressive they are. Perfect for both beginners and experienced painters alike. You'll be amazed at how quickly a few simple brush strokes can transform your project into something truly magical. So grab your brushes and let's get started. The interchangeable frame kit comes in 5 pieces. There's 2 pieces for the back easel, the frame, and then 2 plaque inserts plus the back of the frame set. I did seal all the pieces with multi-purpose sealer, let it dry, and lightly sanded it. Picked up some open water on my 3/4 inch oval wash, kind of base coating loosely around the edge of the hat. And then once I get that line in there, I just do a slip slap, which is a real simple kind of an X stroke using the flat of my brush, not so much the chisel edge. Just adds a little bit of movement and doesn't make it all solid and heavy. It gives it more of that weathery, wintry look. And I'm just repeating the same technique on the bottom plaque insert. And I did go back and give a couple coats. I picked up some Stormy, and you can see the background's still a little bit wet from that second coat. And I just kind of added it around the outer edge, and then I used that slip slap stroke to kind of coax it and feather it toward the center. Just a little bit of paint. Don't try to get it on too heavy. You can always go back and add a second coat. I did thin this down a little bit with water so it wasn't quite so heavy and opaque, and then just take a clean brush and kind of slip slap it and blend it in so that center is just a little bit lighter. I picked up some Prussian blue on my 3/4 inch angle and used a lot of water. This is such a strong color. And then I caught loosely because I used a lot of water, just loosely floated around the edge, and you can see it's not all smooth and even. Again, it gives it a little more of a frosty impression instead of a perfectly shaded background. And you think about all the snow in there, it just adds to that effect. This is Snow White, and with Snow White it's going to take several coats to get it nice and opaque, and I do want his face to be nice and strong and bright. If you're looking for a quicker base coat it with warm white and then top coat it with Snow White. The hat is Payne's Gray. I did not want to go with black because I think the Payne's Gray just adds a little more, even though it appears black, it's just a softer darkness. And it just allows for a little more color, and it helps all of these shades kind of blend together. And this is just a simple base coat. I'm an angle gal, so I'm using my 1/2 inch angle. I love the toe of the brush to kind of follow along the sharp edges, and it gives me a lot of control, and yet it is still a nice base coat brush. I picked up some of that open water that we used on the background on the toe of my 1/2 inch angle, thin it down really well, and I'm doing that same loose stroke. It almost looks like fluffiness if it's not smooth and perfect. I love to use an egg shape for the eyes, and this is an egg stencil. I'm using Payne's Gray and my number 4 Spectacular stencil brush. I always load my brush, wipe it on a paper towel to remove excess paint, and then gently tap for the first layer. And that way you're going to ensure that you're getting nice crisp lines. I want my eyes to be even, so I have trouble with that, so I use a T-square just to make sure that stencil is lined up evenly across the bottom of the eyes. That way you know that the eyes are not going to be lopsided. And using a stencil, they're going to be perfect size. So I'm just adding that in there, and then I will go back and add a second coat on that. This is the nose, and I am using Warm Sunset and my number 5 Radical Round to base coat the nose in there. And I like to go, you know how the carrots have like grooves on them? I like to go that same direction with my paint. I do make sure that that outer line is nice and clean, but then I go back and pull it down with the brush stroke to create the look of those ridges. I loaded my number 12 Diverse dry brush with Melon, wipe it on a paper towel to remove the excess paint, and then gently just dry brush to the desired intensity. And this just takes a little bit of patience. Just let that paint flow off of the brush. Don't try to press harder or get more paint on the brush. It just builds so beautifully and so naturally if you let the brush do the work. Just keep a consistent pressure on it. I do both cheeks at the same time. That way they're going to build up at the same time. I decided this was a little bit too pale, so I just took my brush and dipped it in some watermelon slice just to ramp that color up, make him look a little frostier. I want the eyes to look like they're glowing, so I picked up some of that open water on the toe of my 3/8 inch angle, floating it around the bottom and the right side of the eyes. This brings a little more life and color into the eyes. If it looks a little bit dull, you can pick up just a touch of white and go over top of that. Look how that brings that blue out, makes those eyes just really stand out. This is a trick I tried. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but this is so amazing. I'm taking my small Diverse dry brush and I put a little bit of Snow White on it, and I'm just dry brushing a small blush of a highlight in the top left of the eyes. Look how glassy that makes the eyes appear. I just love that. Look how simple that is. And then of course we want to ramp up those highlights. Picked up some Snow White on my 18-aught Epic script liner, just pulling a little strong comma stroke in the bottom right of the eyes. And then I will go back and add a couple dip dots in the top left using my stylus. Those little eyes just really glow. Now I did use lamp black and my 20-aught Epic script liner to put the eyebrows in and the eyelashes. Make sure that paint is thinned down so you can paint quite a distance without reloading. It's going to make your strokes look so much more consistent and just really flow well. I decided to darken that shading around the base of the hat brim with a little bit of Payne's Gray. Just be careful, Payne's Gray is such a powerful color, but it brings together, it deepens that shadow, and it brings together the hat and the face beautifully. Picked up a little bit of that open water to shade around the eyes. This is going to make the eyes look like they're snuggled into that snow on his face and not just painted on top of his face. So it's just a very light float. Just a little bit of paint makes a big difference. I always add a little shading around the eyes just to help that settle into the facial features. I did not want to go onto the cheeks, so I'm just going around the side of the nose and adding a little more in there. Picked up some fresh mango on my angle brush and I'm highlighting the top of the nose. Just pull it down and let it kind of blend out. A little bit of deep burgundy to shade along the bottom, and I float and then I pull it up every so often, and it just naturally creates those ridges. And when I painted the base coat on there, because I didn't paint it on super smooth, I used those strokes from the number 5 Radical Round. I could kind of follow those. I'm going back now with a hint, just a hint, of Payne's Gray to deepen the shading under the eyebrows and under the eyes. Be careful, too much Payne's Gray under the eyes, he starts to look really tired. to do the cardinal, and I did kind of sketch it on using my white chalk pencil. I usually do my designs that way. I've loaded my number 5 radical round with melon, and I'm following, as I'm painting, I'm thinking about feathers and how the direction of the feathers would lie. And that's how I'm laying the paint in. So I'm using long strokes like on the forehead and those head feathers. Keep those strokes long and smooth. As I go around his face, are a little shorter and choppier. Down his breast are longer. His tail, definitely long feathers. So even though the entire bird is base coated with the same color, after I get this base coat in, I can still see all of the bird sections because of the way that I applied the paint. It just makes it super simple. You don't have to go back and keep tracing a pattern on there. And how easy is that? Just going to repeat that same stroke work with watermelon slice. I don't want a pink bird, I want a red cardinal. So I'm just loading my brush, and it's fairly thin paint. Now, if I were to paint watermelon slice directly on that background, he would be so dull and it would take so many layers that it would never be a bright cardinal. I want to make sure he glows. And this is just putting that bright melon base coat underneath, just assures that the paint is going to really stand out and be nice and bright. Follow those feather strokes. And again, even though everything is painted the same color, I can definitely see each individual section on the bird. I've loaded my toe of my 3/8 inch angle with deep burgundy. And now I'm going to add shading to help separate those sections out. This shading is a little more controlled, a little bit smoother. You can see I'm slowing down quite a bit because I want to make sure that I really define those sections. I don't try to get perfect shading with the first application. This is just a light shading, and then I can go back and enhance it and add more. I have more water on my brush than paint, so I can move that shading around. But look how I can go around the edge and just pull those strokes in to recreate that look of feathers. My highlight is from the top and the left, so my shading is going to be on the bottom and the right. Now, I did base coat the bird's face with Payne's Gray, and it just was not enough, so I'm going back with soft black. This is golden straw to paint the beak, and because it's pale yellow, it will take 2 coats. And I'm using my number 2 radical round for that. It just gives me a little more control. Picked up a little bit of that deep burgundy to add a hint of shading, and also it gives a little more color. Highlight the top with a little bit of snow white. This is melon, and I've just loaded the toe of my 3/8 inch angle, and I'm using it almost like a liner, but because it's an angle brush, I can also go back and float. So I can lean it on the toe and I get more of a liner like this, or I can use the flat of it and add a wider, thicker shading. Now this looks really strong. I have this paint very thin, so it has a lot of moisture in it. As it dries, it's going to need more coats, and I would rather add more layers because you build that depth as opposed to putting it on super heavy. And so as I'm adding this in, you can see it will build up. I did dip dot the eye with golden straw using the handle end of my brush. Now I'm going back with just a little bit of snow white to brighten up those highlights. Again, it's going to appear much stronger wet than as it dries, so rein back on the intensity of the application, let it dry, and then you can decide if you need to go back and brighten it up some more. And I did go back several times to brighten this up. I always think, oh, this looks good and it's bright enough, but there really isn't a lot of brightness in the background yet, so it's hard to decipher how much paint is needed. A little bit of color in the eye. I'm taking deep burgundy and just kind of swooping it around the bottom and the right side. Dip dot a lamp black pupil, and I steady my right hand with my left hand so I can get that dip dot right in the center. Just going back and adding a little more shape to that face to make sure it is correct. Picked up a tiny bit of Payne's Gray, and this is beautiful shading over that deep burgundy, but don't let it get ahead of you. It just needs a little touch of this deep dark color, and only in the darkest places. So underneath the wing, there's definitely going to be a stronger shadow. Where the wing divides, you can enhance that with a little bit of the Payne's Gray. Just keep that minimal. A little bit of paint makes a big difference. Now I'm going back with a little more Snow White. And I thought when I was doing this, maybe it was too much, but as the bird dried, it just was exactly what it needed. I didn't add it everywhere. Dip dot of white in the eye. Again, I'm steadying my hand with my other hand. This, I thought I would show you how I trace or paint. When I create this design, I don't have a pattern, so I just kind of have to trace it on, and I love the white chalk pencil. It disappears with water, so it's very easy to work with. Loaded my 3/8 inch angle with foliage green to base coat the holly leaves. I love because I can get right up into those points with that angle. It just, to me, it's super easy to use. Again, I'm an angle girl. You'll know whether or not you're going to need 2 coats. Now I'm using a little bit of plantation pine. Make sure that the leaf is dry. I want to shade along the bottom against the base of the berries, along the bottom side of the leaf, and then down the opposite side of the center. And that's going to create those natural curves. And I do like to do my holly leaf veins a little bit of a curve to them. So as I float this down the center, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a curve. It just looks a little more natural. Just keep that nice and soft. Do the same thing for the other leaf. A little bit of Payne's Gray on that bottom or right side. Our highlights are from the top and the left. I'm just going to follow that outer edge and that center vein. Make sure you get a little bit of a curve on there. Loaded my Epic script liner. This is the 18-aught with Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to paint those center veins in. Nice and slow. Make sure your brush, if your paint doesn't roll off of your brush easily, you don't have enough moisture in your brush. Picked up some celery shoot, and I'm just going to pop some highlights in there. This is another color when it's wet. It's just super intense and looks super strong, but as it dries, it tones down considerably. But I really wanted to bring a lot of brightness into this design with the highlights and pops of color. So I kind of like this being a little bit stronger. I use my painter's palette to paint the berries. I have a terrible time with circles. Anytime I can use a template, like for the eyes or berries or anything round oval, I go to a template or a stencil. It just makes my life easier. It always makes me look good. Make sure when you're stenciling, this is melon, wipe that brush on a paper towel after you load it, before you stencil, and that will ensure clean, crisp edges. I thought I wanted the berry branch to be, I picked golden straw, and after I painted this on and looked at it, it didn't look like I wanted it. It turned kind of green, so I went back with soft black to top coat it, and it needed that. So I'm just going over that yellow and adding a top coat. A little bit of Payne's Gray to deepen those shadowing on the nose. and a little bit there at the base. Adding some open water with a touch of white in it. I just thought I wanted to bring that lighter blue color in. If you wanted to, you could use aqua sky, but I didn't want to get another bottle out, so I just lightened it with a little bit of white. I love the way that little bit of icy blue brings out and enhances those colors very nicely. I put some on the leaves, but I go back and darken the leaves a little bit. I left this a little bit more pure open water because this is a darker color and it needed to show up just a little bit stronger. Just going back now to top coat those berries with watermelon slice. Make sure they're dry in between layering so you don't smear the paint. It's always better to be safe. Now I have a little bit of melon. I had watermelon slice on my brush and I picked up some melon and I stenciled the berries on the smaller berries. Kind of like the way they looked. This is a number 2 diverse dry brush and I picked up some melon. I'm just kind of dry brushing some highlights on. Those are a little bit stronger and I like the way they looked. This is black green, and this is when I decided these leaves needed to be just a little bit more contrast to bring out more dimension. So I'm just going in the deepest, darkest places and adding that depth of paint. So around the berries, close to the base of the leaf, and a little bit on those bottom sides, it just makes those leaves look very contoured. Anywhere you want to push it back, and then that celery shoot's going to make it stand out and pop. Using my 1/4 inch awesome angle, and I'm floating some deep burgundy along the bottom and the right side of the berries, and this is where you get to decide which berries are in front of the other berries. At this point, I hadn't decided whether or not I was going to put snow on them, so I'm just dressing them up as if they were standalone berries without snow on them. Deepening that with a little bit of deep burgundy, and I put a little bit of Payne's Gray on there. Look how rich that makes. I love Payne's Gray on these deeper red colors. Just really gives it that dark, rich, purpley effect. And it's transparent, so it's just going to really resonate with those colors underneath. I wanted to do like a comma stroke on the berries, and then I decided that was kind of boring, so I took my stylus and I kind of just scratched it around and made those highlights just a little more shimmery than solid. Loaded the toe of my 1/2 inch angle with snow white, and I'm just going to layer that snow over the brim of the hat and around that bird. It's very thin, super thin paint, and I'm just kind of lightly floating that on. And then I wondered what it would be like if I used my diverse dry brush. And guys, I loved it. It gives that soft, fluffy, frosty effect. I just cannot achieve that with my brush. And this is a little bit damp, so I can flick it and get kind of a, like, you know how snow blows and you get that little bit of misty snow that's kind of fluffing up and blowing away. Love the way that looked. Just super soft. I think it adds so much to this design, and I had so much fun playing around with that. Now I did pick up some snow white on the toe of my radical round, and I'm laying it on the leaf just a little bit heavier. I really wanted this to be just a bigger, fatter pile of snow, and I can go back and kind of lay it in stronger in places. And take your time on this, because as this dries, you'll see where it needs to be piled a little bit deeper. But I let it just be very soft and the paint is wet so I can move it around for a while. Don't do heavy loads of paint. Just keep it light and fluffy. Now I'm going back with my diverse dry brush, and look how I can fluff that up and make it look misty, and fluffy is such a good word for that because it just really makes it frosty and misty, and look how that just flows in there very nicely. I know I was getting a little carried away. I couldn't stop. I just was having so much fun. But the more I added, the more I loved the way it was going. And just keep that a very light touch. Oh my gosh, it just doesn't take much at all. And you know how snow blows around. So even though snow's piled up on the top side, the bottom side of the leaf's probably going to get a few flakes that land on it that are going to sort of kind of pile up just a little bit. Going with a smaller diverse dry brush just to have a little bit more control. And I didn't want the bird to look like he was in a blizzard and I put too much on his head, so I can just go back and wipe it off. That's what's so fantastic about the dry brushing. It's just a little bit of paint makes a big difference. But on the flip side, because you're just using a little bit of paint, it doesn't take much if you don't like it to just lift it off. I decided to go back and highlight this little branch, exactly what it needed. Look how it pops now. It just really stands out. Added a little more brightness on the beak. This is where you kind of go back and evaluate. Yep, it does need some snow around the berries. So I'm just using the toe of my radical round just to kind of pile, and I'm using little short kind of tappy strokes just to kind of pop it in there. Be careful, don't lose the shading. The shading is what divides the berries, and just a little tap is all that's needed. Give that indication that that snow's piled up. Doesn't have to be much. Don't lose that dark area. And look how that just makes, keeping that dark in there really makes it stand out. I wanted to really sharpen those points, and then I thought, well, what would happen if I just pulled a little bit down? And I love the way it kind of drips off the tip of that little holly leaf. So I just kind of played around with that. Look at that. Isn't that, I mean, just a couple little strokes, and what a difference. What a difference that makes. I had so much fun playing around with this, and I just put tiny bits, just tiny bits. And it just really makes those kind of just stand out. Don't overdo it. I was really close to overdoing it, but I was having so much fun. And you can see I just have just a bit of color on my brush. Now I put so much snow on the right hand side that I was kind of ignoring the left hand side of the hat. So I did go over there and add a little bit more. I wanted to add snow on the nose, but you know, when you do the nose, sometimes when you go down in the nose, it matches the face and then you lose the edge of the nose. So if you notice, I kind of bumped it down from the edge of the nose, and I'm just putting it in heavier, kind of in the middle, almost to the edge, as opposed to right on the edge, because I didn't want to lose that line. Going back with my diverse dry brush, just to really strengthen some of those areas. And look at that, we got to pull it down. Oh, I love that little bit on the tip of the nose. That's just exactly what it needed. Keep it soft. And I didn't make it even, just keep it very random where the snow's piled and feather it out. Loaded my splatter brush with thinned snow white, and I do love this splatter brush because I have really good control over mostly where it goes. So I always say it's like a shotgun. You aim it and you aim it exactly where it's going to go, and you can pretty much hone in on that area. I really don't like snow to get falling snow to get in the eyes, and these eyes are so perfect. Once you load your splatter brush, though, always, always, always test it on your palette before you apply it to your surface. That's going to ensure that you don't have those big strings like sometimes you get if the paint's just not the right consistency. Now I could go in and cover the eyes up, but with this brush I can be careful, and then if I do get any in the eyes, I can go back and just take a damp Q-tip and kind of wipe it out. This is the stencil for the lettering, and I'm just positioning the stencil, tape it down so it doesn't move around while stenciling. And I'm using my number 4 Spectacular stencil brush and Snow White. Always clean that brush, wipe it over a paper towel before stenciling it onto the surface, especially when you're using stencils that have little tiny lines on them. It's so easy for the paint to run underneath if the brush is overloaded or the paint is too wet and heavy. It's just not going to be perfect. So I do give this 2 nice coats, and then after it's dry, I like to go back and fill in the bridges. To me, that makes it look just a little bit more hand painted. So I do take the time with my, this is the 18-aught Epic script liner, to make sure that those lines are all connected. And if you use 2 coats on the stenciling, you'll probably have to use 2 coats to make the bridges blend in. And this stencil really does not have a lot of bridges on it. This one's fairly easy to connect, especially on the Hello Winter. I think the R was the only one that had bridges on it. This is the frame, and to get the frame painted, I'm using a cosmetic wedge, and you can get these in the Walmart, drugstore, anywhere they sell cosmetic supplies. And I've loaded the bottom of it with lamp black, and I'm just lightly tapping. Now, you want to make sure that you don't get paint on the inside of the frame, because it will make the panels, sometimes with that extra paint in there, it makes them really snug and hard to fit. If you do happen to get paint on the edges and your panel doesn't fit in easily, just take a little bit of sandpaper and lightly sand to make sure that these edges are clean so that the panels slip in and out very easily. Load that cosmetic sponge, and I always tap it on the palette to even it out across the bottom of the sponge. Too much paint is going to make it easier to drip down the side edges. So to ensure that that's not going to happen, and you just have to take your time. It's just going to take a little bit of time to apply that paint. Don't try to get perfect the first coat. Put a nice even coat on it. Give it a light sand, and then apply the second coat. I am using Aleene's Fast Grab Tacky Glue to adhere the frame to the back of the plaque kit. And I'm just putting a nice even bead all around the outer edges. When I first did the interchangeables, I thought I would be really smart and use hot glue, but hot glue has too much dimension, and by the time I got from one side to the other side, it already started to cool down, and it just didn't work. So use a good, whatever your favorite glue is, a tacky glue or quick glue, whatever works well, and then just line it up, press it on, and you can use little clips to make sure it dries. The other 2 pieces that are included are the easel and the easel holder. And once this is dry, just flip it over on the back side. And I did the same thing, put a little bit of the quick grab glue on there, fast grab glue, and to make sure that it was going to set up quickly, I did put a few dots of hot glue on it, just to, because I'm impatient. I wanted it to be fast. And so then it wasn't as big of an area to cover, so it worked out really well. Now I have trouble with straight lines. I wanted to make sure that it was going to be nice and straight. So I'm kind of looking at the bottom edge. I wanted to bump it up just like a hair from the bottom. And then I can use my T-square, and that makes sure that it's going to stand straight up. If this back easel is crooked, then it's not going to stand really straight. The insert, I put a little bit of hot glue on that because I wanted it to be instant, and you have to glue these in. If you don't glue them in, it's not going to stay in place and stand up. And then I just filled the crack with some tacky glue between the hot glue, and I did that backwards. I should put the tacky glue in first and then the hot glue. But make sure that it's in there nice and tight. Hold it, let it dry. That hot glue will set up right away, but that tacky glue is what's going to bond it forever and ever. Once it is dry, then you can stand it up, and it is great. And if you want to, you could paint the side outer edges of the frame. But look how nicely those panels fit in there. They just fit the bottom in and then slide the top in. And what's nice about, see these holes in the back? They're for your fingers, so you can just pop them in there and pop out that panel. And that's how easily you can change those out. This is such a fun design for all seasons, all around. And the way it stands, these panels will not fall out. It always seems like there's one thing that doesn't get filmed, and for some reason my camera wasn't on when I stenciled in the snowflakes. I did use the Sparkle Pal for these particular snowflakes, but any stencil that has snowflakes on it would work well. Everything I used today is listed in the links below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with your friends. That way you won't miss out on upcoming designs. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together. And remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference.